This was his first speaking engagement in front of an audience. It's a bit dreadful. He did an amazing job. I think we can give him another round of applause. I have a moment before I speak about IMEC where I'm going to address a few things that I was waiting patiently for 24 hours to address, so you'll have to bear with me. And I'm going to remind Ambassador Turbulence about a year back we were sitting together at the forum discussing ITU2. And Ambassador to Morocco later on gave me some advice, which I hold dearly, but I'm going to disregard completely right now, because I'm going to do the same thing again. He said, don't be too sentimental. I try not to, but there are a few things that require some correction, and the responsibility on my shoulders as the only Israeli speaking here in an official capacity in the offline version is high. And so I will correct a few mistakes. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Notice that despite the fact that we are 0.2 of the world population, we took up most of the conversation except the session that was focusing around Ukraine and Russia. So you spoke about us 90% of the time. We can change the logo from Geopolitics to Middle East and Israel with an Indian accent and Arabic affairs. I think there are much more important things going on in the world right now. India's tension with China, Pakistan, Russia and Ukraine, the takeover of Taliban over Afghanistan, the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the horrible, horrible terror attacks in Africa, which were regarded yesterday actually, talking about the Sahel, and now in Russia, after yesterday. And there are amazing, amazing shifts within multilateral platforms and unilateral platforms, and I think they all deserve more attention than my country does here. And so it's very interesting, and I think it's a moment for introspection that you can all do and ask yourself, why are we so interesting to you, and how much information is out there and disinformation is out there about my country, and why do you latch onto it so hardly? To be an Israeli diplomat requires thick skin. As I said, I don't have that thick skin, and so I decided to actually address a few things and correct them. The numbers you were using in regards to casualties in Gaza, they are not correct. They're the numbers of Hamas. Okay? You're using 32 as if it's God-given. Does Hamas wear a uniform? Do you know how many of the people were civilians or fighters? You don't. Don't use that number. You're supporting the allegations of a terror organization. Wait until the war is over. Then use the numbers that are the real numbers. You really don't know what they are right now. Second is, and here with all respect to you, Excellency, I remind you that Jordan also had its past with Palestinians in September 1970. When you have to do something for the protection of your people, you have to do it, and this is what we're doing. And so did Syria, and so did Egypt. And I didn't hear much of the world at that time, and I don't think there were mass protests in Europe at the time, and not in America. And it's interesting that after Assad butchered 500,000 of his people, we heard nothing and no protests, and when Israel goes to an operation, after the largest per capita terror attack ever, okay, in Indian size, this would be 200,000 people dead within a day. Have that in your brain. And so after that, we have huge, huge protests against Israel's retaliation. I'll say a word to the ambassador of Turkey. I love your country. I served in your country. I know I am bashing it, but I just want to answer your question that you posed. 3 ambassadors were ejected. That's the number that you were asking. 2 of them during recent years with AKP, and 1 during the 1980s after the coup, and then there was a constitution in 1982, and at that moment there was one else. In regards to request for a ceasefire, there was a ceasefire. 6th of October, there was a ceasefire. It was there. Hamas broke the ceasefire. If you're coming to us and demanding a ceasefire, you must remember that there are 0 Israelis willingly in Gaza right now. Not the IDF soldiers want to be there, not the hostages want to be there. And there were 0 Israelis from 2006 until the morning of October 7. There's truly a Judenrein place on earth, it is Gaza. Okay? And if you want a ceasefire, the first thing you need to do is ask for the release of the 132 hostages, and you will have a ceasefire tomorrow. But that's not what most countries are focusing on, and they're applying pressure to Israel, which should be applied to Hamas. So I remind that as well, because we heard that as well. I want to say something that, again, slipped everybody's mind. Gaza has another border with Egypt, and that border right now is being reinforced with 3 layers of fences, not 1, and soldiers up to here. it can import and export whatever it wants to Egypt. It's another friendly Arabic country, but for some reason that border is closed as well. Then I refer you to a poll that was done by PSR. It's a Palestinian institute. The Palestinian pollster, Dr. Shkaki, from the 23rd of 3rd, has nothing to do with Israel. It shows that 70% of Palestinians want to have Hamas in power, both in the West Bank and in Gaza Strip. So wake up, please, and understand that if that's a fact, and also 80% by the same poll are supportive of the massacre of 7/10, then I don't understand who our partner for the two-state solution is. I hope that we have one, okay? I know you're a peaceful man who promoted peace. I'm also a peaceful person, and I would love to have peace. And I think most Israelis would. The word apartheid came up, not in our context in South Africa, but then again in our context, so I'll say something about this. As my friend Ilan Neuer said, how many Jews are in Jordan today? How many in Egypt? How many in Syria? You know, this goes both ways. We actually have Arabs in my country. It's about 20% of our populace. Then a quote about Iran, Iraq. The ambassador said it was not here. I wanted to tell him on the spot. This is a far relative, a very distant relative of mine who passed away. It's Mr. Henry Kissinger. And what he said actually was, it's a shame that both sides could not lose in the Iran-Iraq war. That's the exact quote. And I think he was wrong. He was a brilliant man, but he was wrong on that. I think they did both lose. And I think they're still losing today. Last, and then I go to IMEC for a second. India very wisely adopted the policy of de-hyphenation. It's smart. You're friends with everybody. Or you can decide not to be friends with anybody. But what you have is interests and not sentiments in your foreign policy. I think this is exactly what foreign policy needs and how it works, and it makes sense. And when we talk about making sense, sticking to non-aligned movement patterns in multilateral platforms doesn't make sense for India. So if you're talking about the change of pattern, is it happening or not happening? It happens when it makes sense for India. And India has its interests, and we respect that as Israel, but we're happy to see that more countries are asking themselves, what are they drawing back from adhering to the same non-aligned movement lines of bashing Israel in every platform, when Israel supplies them, and you said yourself, some of the speakers, with some of the armament they need to protect themselves. And this is just one thing that we offer. We also offer gas and water technologies and a lot of other things. The Abrahamic Accords were proof of late President and very brave President Anwar Sadat, and I know that some in the Arab world don't like him. But he said, Kul wacha lechalo. And he was correct about that, because if Arafat can say that the Palestinians are the only ones to decide on their destiny, then each and every Arabic state can decide on their own destiny. And some of them have decided to make peace, and we're happy for that, and we relish that. And I think the same applies also to Saudi Arabia. And when a project takes form, such as IMEC, and I was just getting to it, so you have to suffer me a minute longer, okay, then it's the prerogative of Saudi Arabia, if it wants to promote it, and not of Iran, and not of China, who are extremely fearful of this project taking place. I'll say a little bit about IMEC. IMEC comes from Ambassadors Ushpis and Ambassador Shringla, and their idea was called Railway for Peace, and it was under I2U2 platform, where people ask me if I2U2 is viable. It's very viable. It's just this one portion, which is the biggest portion of it, has been taken out and became the headstone for other platforms. It was meant to bring back the US into an area where it was absent for many years during the Obama and Trump administrations. And the way was using interests which are both economical and political. And I have to use Dennis Ross's term here, which is it's doomed to succeed. The reason it's doomed to succeed is not because it's economically going to be a replacement for the Suez Canal. It's not. One ship, one container ship, does more than a train line can do in a long time. But the idea is diversification, and every other place on the planet is doing the same thing. Routes are being diversified. Supply chain is a very critical thing past COVID, and people understand that. And so I'm saying it's doomed to succeed. And when it happens, just like NEOM and just like Line, and Saudi Arabia is very aggressive on its ambitions and how it's doing things, it will happen. It will also be a hub for innovation, which is much more important than that little railway which will go all the way into Haifa. And last, and I know I took a lot of time, but it was important for me to also express these things. We have history to show that these things work. And between Turkey and Israel, even at the height of conflict during the Mavi Marmara conflict. We managed to create a line called the Iskandaron-Haifa line, and some of you don't even know that it exists, but it works on the Tyr Convention, and it was helping Jordan, by the way, primarily to export its goods when it could not do so due to the Arab Spring and other factors efficiently through the Suez Canal. And so, or through Syria, which was an issue in those days, the civil war. So I'm saying there are examples of this. This can happen. It's a promoter of peace. It's a really important thing, and we are happy for it to becoming. I have much more to say, but I know we don't have time.
Thank you very much.